just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. And walks the urban penguin.
Hello and a really big warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallet, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at how we have migrated from the Docker build command to create images to the Docker BuildX command. We'll see the reasons why we do that, and one of the big reasons is the support for multi-architecture images. With the one command, we can build for both AMD and the ARM platform if we need to. So come on, why don't we go through and look at this glorious technology on our Ubuntu 24.04 system. And look at this, a really big warm welcome through to the command line of my Ubuntu 24.04 system. But as always, it's a good idea to start with our hostname CTL command so we can see what we're really running. So Ubuntu 24.04.2. We can clear the screen, and we can also go through and take a look at Docker. I have this already installed. If we look at Docker -- version, you can see then that I've got 28.0.4, and this is the official build from the Docker repositories. One of the things I want to be able to show you is that we can build and push directly through to Docker Hub. So allow me to log in. So my user account there is the Urban Penguin. We can go through and authenticate through to this, but it's telling me that I can use a personal access token. But as it is at the moment, I'm just using my password. It's simple enough, but obviously it's not secure as using an access token. So let's get the password configured. And we can see that it also tells me and warns me that the password is going to be stored in a clear text file, but it's going to be deleted when I log out. So I'm not too concerned with this. So we can now clear the screen with Control and L, and you can see that I'm in my home directory and in web. We can begin by listing the files I've already created. So if I run through an ls-l, you can see the 3 files that I have created. So the first file, the Docker file, is used, of course, when we're building our image. It's the manifest or instructions to the build, or as we're going to be using, the BuildX command. I'm not really building very much into this. We're just using the standard Apache image and adding in our own custom web page. And believe me, that web page isn't really too much either. We can go through and take a look at the index page, and we'll see that there is no great design thought gone into this, but at least we know we're getting the right page from our image. When we look at the Docker Compose file, this is, well, maybe a little bit incorrect. Now it includes a version number, but we can go through and remove the version number. So let me go through and just delete this. It's no longer required. But we've got then our Apache service using the image, the Urban Penguin, and simple_Apache. We're mapping our ports, and we're calling the container Apache hello. We're going to be looking at building that image and the build tools that we now have. Traditionally, we might have used Docker image build or Docker build. Within the official client, we can still do this, but it will in fact revert to BuildX in the background. If I use build -t and then simple_Apache --dot, we might think then everything has worked and has worked naturally the way it always has. And to a degree it has. When I go through and look at my Docker images, my image is now in the local repository. And if I go through now and maybe remove this image because I don't particularly need it, so I can do a Docker RMI and then tab on my simple Apache. So this seems to work, but it's using the default BuildX environment, and that writes in the same way as it always had through to our Docker daemon. If I look at Docker BuildX and ls, listing this in the standard way with our ls at the end of BuildX, we can see a little bit of our details on this. And the key thing is that the driver it is using is the Docker driver. So this means then that it's using the build cache of the Docker daemon and is communicating directly through to the Docker daemon, much in the same way as the build command did before. We can also see the supported platforms. This is an indication that we can build for different platforms, but by default, we only support the platform that we are installed on. We can look at a little bit more detail by using our traditional inspect and the name of the BuildX environment that we want to look at. When we go through and look at this, we can see a little bit more detail. It explains that we are using the driver Docker. We can see the build kit version. We see the platforms in a little bit more detail, and we can see the labels and the IP address of the gateway. If I want to support more platforms, then I can go through and install the qemu-user-static package. Let's go through and make sure we can get this spelled correctly and installed. Now, on most modern Linux systems, this is also going to register those platforms, so we shouldn't need to do anything else, but Docker still recommends running a container to ensure that the platforms are registered. I'm going to go back now and run my BuildX and inspect, and you can see that the platforms have been registered, and I can see then a range of supported platforms now. I can't run that locally, but I can use the BuildX environment to create images for these platforms. But to be on the safe side, I'm going to run the container. It also gives you a clear idea if you're using other systems where the platforms haven't been registered, how you can register them. For the moment, though, we'll go through and just create another environment, and we'll run the container from the new environment, so Docker BuildX. And then making use of the create subcommand, we can go through and specify a name, so --name. I'm going to call the environment simple_Apache. Instead of using the driver Docker, we're going to use --driver docker-container. In this case, we then fire up a container in the environment, and the environment then is completely separated from our Docker daemon. So we have no chance of anything flowing from our build environment into our live environment. When I go through now and list my environment, we can see then that I've got my new simple Apache environment based on the Docker container. It's inactive. Well, we can see what happens when I use it. If I want to work with this environment, I can use BuildX and use, and then simple Apache. But this won't really have changed anything other than the environment that I'm currently working in. We can always check our working environment by taking a look for the asterisk. We can see it's against the simple Apache, so that is where I'm working now. Now we want to start up our Docker container within our environment, so Docker BuildX, inspect. But we don't just want to look at it, we want to start up the container. So we can go ---- bootstrap. This will start up our Docker container that is going to run our environment. It's this environment that keeps us separated from everything else in the Docker daemon. So we run our build environment now inside of the container. And this is one of the big differences with the standard build command. So now when I run my BuildX ls, you can see that I'm up and running. Again, the asterisk indicating that this is my current environment. I can still swap between different environments whilst the environment is running. We can also see that I have all of the supported platforms shown in both of my environments. But as we mentioned before, if they haven't been registered after you've installed the qemu-user-static, we can go ahead and run a container to register these. This is still written in Docker's best practice, so there's no real harm to do it. The container will start up, run, and then delete itself if we use it with the --rm switch. So it's Tony Stiggy, bin fmt, ---- install, and then all. We can pull the image down. It's registered then the environments, so we should be good to go. Now, to say we are running in a container. So if I go through and run Docker PS, we can see then that my environment container is up and running, and PS-A, you can see I don't have any stopped containers. So the container that registered the platform has deleted itself nicely once it had finished. So we are good to go now with our build environment. So let's go through and use our Docker build and X. As we go through, we can specify that we want to build an image. We can specify the tag. And I'm going to specify the urban penguin. And then simple underscore Apache. We can give it a version number as well. So we'll keep it nice and tidy. And I'm going to call this then :1.0.0. Now this is the clever bit. We can use -- platform, and we can specify the architectures that we want to build for. So I'm not restricted to just building to the platform that I am on. So this is one of the big advantages, is our multi-architecture. So I'm going to put Linux AMD 64, comma, so a comma separated list, Linux ARM 64. Now that's all that I need, and that will do me fine because the ARM 64 will support my Raspberry Pi 5. We can specify -- push, so we're pushing directly through to the Docker Hub, which is why I logged into Docker Hub earlier. And don't forget, as always, the dot at the end to say this directory is what we're looking for our artifacts for building. We can see then that we're building our images, and we can see there the AMD 64 and ARM 64. But you know what? We're not restricted to this. Take a look at this tool. If I use Docker BuildX, we have a subcommand image tools, and this allows us to go through and interrogate an image from the Docker repository. So if I go through and use inspect the urban penguin, and obviously putting in then our simple underscore Apache as the image, I could put a tag if I wanted to look at a specific tag, but let's go through and just take the latest. We can see there that we've built for AMD 64 and ARM 64. And then we have the attestation manifests for those platforms as well. Now, so far, you could say all of this has just been administration, but we can now see the work that we have put in by using Docker Compose to bring up my container. We can use -d to run it detached in our background. And we can see there that we are up and running with our container, which we will now test with our glorious curl command. And we should be able to see our well-crafted web page. And there we have it in all of its glory. If we go through now and look at our Docker images, we can see that we've got our image locally. So this is it. Everything has worked the way that we expected it to work. But let's now go through and look at leaving this environment. Now that we've built the image, there really is no need for us to stay in this environment. So I can go through and specify Docker BuildX and use default. Now that won't have changed anything other than the context in which I'm working. When I go through now and take a BuildX, I can tab complete to see what's available to me. And you can see that among other things, I have a stop subcommand. So to stop the running container within my build environment for my simple Apache, I can just go through and stop and then specify the name of the environment. So simple underscore Apache. Now that's my build environment, so now that has stopped, but I can start it any time that I want to go back into that environment, perhaps to rebuild the image or to update the image. But as I go through now and look at my BuildX and LS, I can see that my container environment has stopped.